Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Benavidez versus Morrell fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So this is an excellent fight. There's no different way of putting it. This is an excellent fight. This is a fight in which, to be honest, was unexpected, in my opinion, to be announced. I mean, when you kind of, see the way that they were developing in the super middleweight division and the progressions in which they were making, in which I'll touch upon more in a moment, it's surprising if you would have said perhaps a year ago that you would be seeing this fight happen already. We'd be, you'd be kind of over the moon, to be completely honest. And like I mentioned, it's an excellent fight. It's two guys in which are definitely going to put on a banger of a performance, you would like to say. And to be honest, I'm going to go through quite a few fights on this card because it is an excellent show. And in general, I think most of them will be excellent matchups. And so, yeah, this whole card, this whole event is, in my opinion, a great event, and PBC have done very well yet again. To kind of give the brief overview of the Benavidez-Morrell fight, Benavidez is 29-0 with 24 KOs, and Morrell is 11-0 with 9 KOs. This fight is for the WBA regular, WBC regular, and WBC interim World Light Heavyweight titles. Benavidez's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Vosdik, and Morrell's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Kalajdik, and Morrell is a southpaw. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, obviously, like I mentioned, they have these three titles on the line. It's interesting to see how there are three titles in which technically are classed as world titles to an extent, but at the same time don't really mean that they are world champions. I mean, the regular to non-regular titles, I don't understand why they're even a thing. I mean, we currently have Kubrat Pulev as a regular world heavyweight champion, which, when you let that sink in, he's classed as a world champion alongside that of Alexander Usyk, and you don't give them that kind of level of respect in that aspect. They're nowhere near each other in that aspect. So, yeah, it's just interesting to see. Obviously, an interim one as well. I mean, again, I've always kind of mentioned this about interim titles. Are they interim titles? I thought interim titles were meant to be for if the champion was not fighting, if he was injured, if, like I say, if he isn't able to compete. But now, with boxing, interim titles just kind of happen all the time. It's not like that of the UFC or anything like that, where interim titles are most of the time kind of always just used when necessary. Like I say, it's a bit different, but it's, I suppose, expected to have these titles on the line for a matchup this big. And to be honest, if we didn't also have Beterbiev and Bivol, two excellent world champions in the division, and this fight could be for all the titles. That could, it has that kind of hype around it. It's that big of a matchup that it could be for all the titles if, obviously, like I mentioned, we didn't have them two excellent champions fighting out for all the belts. So, the light heavyweight division is an interesting time at the moment, but there are some great matchups coming through. And in general, I think, like I said, it's an unexpected, type matchups. Like I said, we didn't perhaps think that they would both go up at weight at the same time, and would you kind of have to argue, would Morrell be fighting at this level if he had gone up in weight? If he hadn't gone up in weight, because Morrell was progressing through excellently. He was having some huge, knockout wins and some great moments in his career, but then all of a sudden he went from, having these big moments against, he beat Agbeko in a fight, which, is a great knockout that he got, but against a kind of world level contender, to then get thrown into a world title fight against Kalajdik, and then all of a sudden this fight. Like I say, I feel like the progression has moved along quicker because of the fact that he has moved up in weight, but it's very smart at the same time for him to do that. You kind of got to think why perhaps he did move up in weight. Maybe he was, trying to get a matchup with one of the big guys in the super middleweight division, but wasn't able to. Maybe he was too big for the weight. Both of these guys are big guys. They are both big for the weight. And so, it's interesting. Benavidez had a bit more of a reason as to why he moved up in weight, because Canelo wasn't giving him the fight and he was kind of just sick of it and fed up. And then, again, like I mentioned, he's a big guy. It's smart for him to have moved up in weight. And to be honest, I think it's been a very smart move for Benavidez to have moved up in weight, because when you look at what's Canelo's kind of going through right now, I don't know if he never actually intended of fighting Benavidez, even when Benavidez was knocking everybody out, even when he just beat Demetrius Andrade. I don't think he really intended on fighting Benavidez Canelo, and so now you look at Canelo going to go fight Terence Crawford, because there isn't really many other options left of who he could fight in the super middleweight division, because of these two leaving and because of various different fighters going as well. The super middleweight division is looking a lot weaker now at the moment, but like I mentioned, I feel like Benavidez has done a very smart thing by moving up, and to be honest, this fight is a great matchup. Like I say, you got to give Benavidez credit for taking Morrell as a matchup. I think Benavidez understands that if he is to win this fight, then there is no doubt that he should fight the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol, and I think that's what he's had to kind of come to terms with. He's probably going to have to fight Morrell at some point. Perhaps in his head, he is fighting him now, where he has that less experience professionally, and it's a smarter thing to do. Obviously, Morrell is an excellent Cuban fighter. He was an amazing amateur with, I believe, like 130-5 record in the amateurs. Like I mentioned, an excellent amateur record, and just something in which has definitely helped him progress faster. In general, I also think Cuban boxers, first of all, they get put through that kind of extensive amateur careers, a lot of them, and also a lot of the times they are moved and progressed quite quickly. And for the most part, you compare, we see Morrell doing this, we see Osas Iglesias doing this at the moment, two great Cuban fighters, Andy Cruz doing this at the moment. Like I mentioned, some great Cuban fighters that are really getting progressed quickly because of the amateur experience in which they had, what they had to go through in the amateurs. And yeah, so you got to understand that just because Morrell doesn't have as big of a record in the pros doesn't mean he's not had that kind of level of experience. 130-5 amateur record is something in which you can't just brush over, and I hope that Benavidez isn't just brushing him over and thinking, like I said, he's not had that much professional experience, maybe it's a better time to take him now. Obviously, if Morrell had more fights and was winning, more fights in the professional time, he would have even more experience. And yes, I understand that would be a worse time to face him. But also at the same time, I think Benavidez he was very frustrated with the fact that the Canelo fight didn't happen. And to right, to be completely honest, he has full right to be frustrated, because everybody was frustrated. All the fans were frustrated as well. And so I think he's kind of realised that if he starts doing that to Morrell, then he's just kind of contradicting himself. And if he isn't giving Morrell them opportunities when he's kind of in line waiting, then, like I say, he's contradicting himself. And whilst he waits around for this Bivol Beterbiev fight, there isn't really much else he can do. And to be fair, if Bivol wins it versus Beterbiev, they might have a trilogy. So you don't want Benavidez just waiting around all the time. And so, like I say, this is a great fight, like I mentioned. And I also think that both of these guys have great skills and also ability to become big stars, huge stars, I believe, and I think they're both on that way. And Benavidez, that bit further at the moment, but Morrell, if he wins this fight, can definitely become a very big star. And I think this fight is also at a good level of rivalry. I think they, dislike each other. I think they're gonna go back and forth. I think there could be a push or a shove at the weigh-ins, but I think, like I say, it's a good level of rivalry, and it's enough to get the fans really invested and interested as well. And like I say, he's changed his career. He's changed his mindset. I think, like I said, he's in taking these opportunities. Benavidez, he's accepting challenges now, and this is, the best point in his career, Benavidez. But Benavidez hasn't always been this disciplined, maybe to an extent is the right way to put it. He's obviously got banned in the past, I believe, about 2018 for a drug positive test. He also has missed weight where he's been stripped of a world title as well. And so he's not always had the most shining of careers. And, perhaps if these fights were coming to him at that point in his career, then people would be a bit more hating towards him and everything like that. But I think because of all he went through with Canelo and the frustrations he had and the fact that he served his ban for the whole drug testing thing and everything, and recently he's been very good with making weight, I think the fans have gotten back on his side and have been really supporting him in them past few fights. So like I say, I think they both have this capability to be very big stars. But to speak about, the whole card as a whole and just how good it is, to be completely honest, I think like I mentioned in past predictions, that PBC have been basically forced to really up their game in just a way, since signing with Amazon Prime. First of all, that's a huge money deal, so I'm sure Amazon Prime are wanting to get money out of their investment, but also at the same time, because of Riyadh season, because they're trying to keep them fighters away from going to Riyadh season, and seems like they don't want to work with them too much. Obviously, Morrell has fought on them, and seems like Canelo is now, but for the most part, they want to keep as many names as possible with them. They're trying to put on the best events possible with the most stacked cards possible, with the most world title fights possible, even if they aren't the biggest names, just the most amount of names in which they can put on that are just high quality with each and every event, and really flexing the roster in which they have. And to be honest, if Canelo doesn't fight on a PBC event again, it could, yes, be a big loss, but they do have a lot of still great talent on their roster. It just will be interesting to see over this next year how many of them get tempted by His Excellency and go over to fight on Riyadh season shows. Obviously, like I mentioned, there's some excellent names on the card. I'm going to go through now, my predictions for some of them, just ones that I'm not going to do predictions for. Hernandez, 6-0, I think, as a Cuban again, he's going to be somebody in which I'm really interested to see how he does. Benavidez Jr. is back after his loss versus Charlo, and so, never really been able to kind of hit the heights in which is like a world title height Benavidez Jr., but he's been in some interesting contests. He's always a very vocal character, and so he could definitely put on an entertaining performance, and he could be a great fighter to have as well. Also, Kermel Moten, again, another great name to have on the card. He's been really pushed hard with Mayweather Promotions, and he is seen to be a next great talent. He hasn't really been tested too much yet, but he's been looking very destructive for every fight in which he's had, and he's not been moved too quickly, but also because he is so young, you don't have to move him too quickly. I think fans are getting this expectation with certain fighters when they're young that they have to get moved quickly because otherwise they're just fighting bums or nobodies. And you don't necessarily, like I say, that doesn't have to be the case, especially when you are young and you have so much talent. It's better to nurture that talent to be able to get to a great point. And like I say, now to speak about some fights in which I wanted to touch upon, so I'm going to four undercard fights in which I want to talk about. And so also on this card is Coelho versus Olivo for the vacant interim world featherweight title. And this is a great matchup. Like I say, I feel like a lot of these fights are going to be great matchups on this undercard, and this is one of them. Olivo, when you look at his fights versus Nunez, for the international title, even though he lost that fight, Nunez was perhaps landing the more significant strikes and was able to have a lot of success with any shots that he did throw. But for the most part, Olivo was excellent in just the sheer body onslaught and the pace, the tempo, just in your face. Like I say, ripping every shot he can. It was just incredible to watch, to be completely honest. And I think Coelho, he's to an extent been able to face an opponent like that because he's just faced Sagawa, and Sagawa is always going to set a similar type of really high tempo pace as well. And Sagawa, you think about the names in which he's fought. He had that great win versus Villa, and then also had a close fight versus Bruce Carrington as well. And so Coelho has faced somebody perhaps a bit similar to that. I think Olivo can definitely cause more problems than that of Sagawa. I think he's more powerful, and I think his work is a bit more heightened. I think his boxing is a bit better than that of Sagawa. Obviously, like I mentioned, this is for that interim WBA World Heavyweight title. Neither of these guys have fought guys that perhaps are the highest of levels in the division. I don't think there is a huge amount of talent pool wise in the featherweight division currently. But these two guys have gotten themselves in a highly positioned world ranking spots, and so they definitely are warranted an interim title. I suppose to an extent, this is obviously Nick Bull's title, and so perhaps the winner of this could go on to a Riyadh season fight versus Nick Bull, or even a Nick Ball could invite him in, and that could be a great fight if Nick Ball's able to beat T.J. Doheny, of course. And so, like I say, I feel like this is just going to be pure entertaining as a fight, and I think that Coelho's going to win via majority decision. I think, like I say, Coelho has faced somebody a bit similar and has had to deal with somebody similar to that of Olivo to an extent. I think Olivo, like I say, is going to cause more problems than that of Seagal was able to do, and I still, believe that Coelho's going to be able to win just with the more conditioned work. Like I say, just being able to land a bit cleaner work and then be able to win via majority decision. It could be the battle of the body shots between these two, but yeah, I think it's going to be an excellent performance. I think it's great to see realistically that Coelho has had tough fights leading up to this. Like I say, tough fights against different styles leading up to this. If it was Alivo against somebody who, Coelho, if he hadn't fought somebody like a Sagawa or, hadn't had the tests in which he's had leading up to this, he definitely could have been kind of caught off guard because it's a very difficult style to deal with Alivo. But I think, like I say, Coelho will be able to do it just about via majority decision. Moving on to Ramos Jr. versus Rosario. This is an interesting fight, to be honest. I think, Rosario, obviously former world champion, he's always been stopped whenever he's lost, which is, something interesting. They both of them got losses versus Lubin, but you look at Ramos Jr.'s loss versus Lubin, and that was a very close, highly contested fight in which a lot of people thought that Lubin deserved to win. I mean, Ramos deserved to win, and then Rosario, his loss versus Lubin was a pretty much a breakdown, and he lost, badly by a knockout, and so, you know. Rosario is coming off a draw versus Hurt, and that was an interesting contest. Rosario has never really had, the cleanest boxing skills, but it is quite often that you see, somebody who perhaps is a bit unorthodox make it to a high level in boxing. And obviously, like I mentioned, he's been able to do great things in the past, and of course, become a world champion. But you can see that he can be hurt, and you can see that he isn't always the most kind of cleanest with his work. He often just kind of throws his jab, which does look a bit slow. It does look like it can be countered. His hooks look very wide and come around the back of the kind of swing around the back of the head a little bit as well. And so, I don't necessarily know if this might be too much for him in this fight. Ramos Jr., on the other hand, like I said, he's a bit of a different type of fighter as well. His main best win was versus Mendoza. That was a great win. That was just before Mendoza went to go on the run in which he went on to beat, Fundora. But that was a very good win for Ramos Jr. And Ramos Jr. is able to look very nice, kind of standing in front of you, perhaps a bit flat-footed, but standing in front of you with good head movement, able to slip the shots, able to pivot as well and catch you off guard by them type of skills in which he has. But like I say, in general, he does catch you off guard with, like I mentioned, the skills in which he does have. And I think I could see him consistently being able to slip Rosario's punches, and he's also got that power as well. So I think that Ramos Jr. is going to win via KO in round 5. I think he's going to be able to really catch Rosario and hurt him. I don't think that Rosario is perhaps past his best. I mean, obviously he's had a lot of experience in his career and fought a lot of tough fights, but he's still not that old. I believe he's 29, and I think Ramos Jr. is like 23, 24. So they are both quite young, realistically, for what they've achieved and the position in which they are in boxing. And Rosario, I believe he started boxing professionally when he was like 17 or something like that. So yeah, like I say, he's achieved a lot in his career in a space of time in which he's still young. And I still, like I say, I've said my prediction, but it's again, a fight that could be an interesting one. I feel like this might be a bit more of a one-sided contest, and like I say, I think Ramos Jr. is going to be able to hurt him with the power in which he does possess, and if he is continually able to slip the shots and showcase his good awareness and his good fight IQ, then he'll be able to, like I say, win by a TKO/KO in round 5. Moving on now to Cruz versus Fierro. I think this is again another excellent contest, to be completely honest. I mean, we have Cruz coming off a surprising defeat versus Jose Valenzuela, where Valenzuela perhaps was just a bit too tall for that of Cruz to an extent. Cruz was just unable to really land the shots in which he wanted to, even when he was trying to be explosive and jump up and be in your face as he always does, as it seemed like Valenzuela was just kind of leaning back and could just avoid most of the shots because of Cruz being quite small, of course, for the weight. And in general, Valenzuela was able to put on a boxing display in the end where he wasn't sitting on the ropes for too long. He was able to have success at mid-range at times. He frustrated Cruz at times as well, which is something in which can be shown to do. I think Cruz was definitely underestimating Valenzuela as a fighter, and I think we all were, to be completely honest. Nobody expected Valenzuela to be able to get that huge win, and so Cruz, yet again, he's been able to come back from a defeat in the past in his career, and he's definitely a fan favourite by far. Every single fight you watch, you go onto YouTube, you even look at the highlights or anything like that, they're getting really the millions of views. He's a fan favourite. He's going to be with every single fight, and I think this is another opportunity where he can show that he's a fan favourite, because I think Fierro is going to make it a great contest as well. Fierro, of course, being that traditional Mexican type style. With Fierro, something I find interesting, he obviously had a loss 2 fights ago. That was when he was with Matchroom. He was getting pushed quite strongly with Matchroom, and I believe he was even headlining Mexican events with Matchroom. And so I don't necessarily know if he's been dropped by Matchroom or not after the loss. Like I say, I don't know. I think the contest was quite a fiery contest between the two of them when he did lose, and it wasn't a bad contest at all. But Fierro lost. He then went on to get a win to get back in the winning column back in Mexico, and now he's just all of a sudden had this fight kind of come out of the blue, to be completely honest, against Cruz. And of course, this being with PBC, there's been seemingly no mention of Matchroom being involved at all. So, just like I say, personally, it's interesting to see, and I'm not too sure if Matchroom had just kind of silently dropped him, but they kind of did that to Matias, so it wouldn't surprise me in which they have done if they have done that. And so, like I say, Fierro has that traditional Mexican type style. Even his loss was very entertaining. He's going to throw a lot. I think that Cruz is going to win via TKO in round 10. I think Fierro's that smaller guy. I think Cruz will try and, Fierro will try and match Cruz, but Fierro, I think it has that worse balance and that worse physicality about him, and I think that's where Cruz is going to be able to land his shots. He definitely could get him out of there in the earlier rounds, but I think if Cruz gets frustrated again, then he can definitely let out that frustration on Fierro, and I don't think Fierro has a good enough defensive movement. I don't think he's a mid-range type fighter at all, and so I just don't believe that there's a way realistically that Fierro is going to be able to cause too many problems for that of Cruz, unless Cruz is really kind of lost his game plan, because there was times in which in that fight versus Valenzuela where Cruz maybe took a bit of time out at points, and Fierro might be able to capitalise at them times, but for the most part, like I say, I think Cruz is going to win via TKO in round 10, if not earlier. And then the final fight on the undercard in which I'm going to speak about is Figueroa versus Fulton, the rematch, and this is for the I believe to be, or if not, then Figueroa has it, vacant WBC World Featherweight title. Like I say, I don't necessarily know if this is a vacant title or if Figueroa got elevated to full champion. It wouldn't surprise me if Figueroa has been elevated to full champion. It was interesting to see that this belt was on the line and that, perhaps Figueroa has been elevated to full champion, because Vargas had the belt. He went on, he fought Foster before fighting Nick Ball, and that was up in super featherweight division, and then of course he didn't win that one, and then he drew versus Nick Ball, and so I don't know necessarily if the WBC were just fed up the fact that Vargas hadn't won 2 fights in a row and stripped him. I don't know, but Vargas's belt has now been vacant. And normally, if you draw a fight and you are a world champion, you normally keep your belt. So, like I said, I don't necessarily know why this belt is on the line, but it is, and it's a rematch in which I think is a very necessary rematch, to be completely honest. And Figueroa, since moving up into the featherweight division, has been on a destructive type of run, to be honest, and is coming off an excellent victory last time out. And Fulton is coming off a very tough fight last time out, and of course, he had a bit of time out after the loss versus Inoue because that's what you need to do. When you lose badly and you lose at a high level when all the eyes are on you, you need to have time out. First of all, of course, for your health wise, to make sure that you're okay and you can take a shot still and be able to keep coming forward. And secondly, mentally to be able to deal with that as well, because Inoue, when you're losing against him, all eyes are going to be on you, and a lot of eyes were on him when he lost, and he lost badly, and it was really elevating in Inoue's career. So many eyes were on him that really, like I say, elevated, pushed his career along. And so Fulton, it must have been detrimental to his mental health, to be completely honest. And he's come back now. He's had a fight versus Castro. He managed to win. He showed a lot of grit and heart, I would say. And that was impressive to see, but he also does look different at the same time. He obviously got dropped versus Castro. He was kind of admiring his work a bit. His footwork is seemingly slowed down a bit. I don't know if that's going up in the weight or not, but he seems to be more willing to stand and throw. He was definitely willing to do that versus Figueroa in the first fight, but he just isn't, like I say, got that kind of sharpness about him as much anymore. I don't know. Well, I don't believe. And so Figueroa is, like I said, since the defeat, been on an excellent run of form and looks a lot better at this weight. Figueroa looked very skinny and not as strong at all at the weights when he was fighting Fulton Jr. at super bantamweight. And so I think Figueroa is going to win via TKO in round 8. I think Figueroa has, like I mentioned, changed his career around and propelled his momentum onto the up, whilst Fulton Jr. has kind of decreased his momentum a little bit and just isn't on the same kind of trajectory and has, perhaps reached his peak, to be completely honest. And it is very sad to see because I was a big fan of Fulton when he was, winning all these fights just before the Inoue fight and was looking excellent. And he was a great champion. And I was frustrated when Inoue, obviously when Inoue won, I wasn't frustrated and that was a great performance. But when fans were saying and kind of discrediting Fulton as a fighter, that kind of annoyed me a bit because of how good I knew that Fulton was before the fight versus Inoue. So, that was a bit of a shame, but like I say, I feel like Figueroa is just in that great position at the moment where he's picking his angles and really pushing you back and getting you up against the ropes and just offering great shots when he's doing so. And yeah, we're going to have to be wary of the low shots from Figueroa because, like I say, he picks his shots and his angles and he works them excellently in close. But, sometimes he has been a little bit known to throw his shots quite low and perhaps a lot of the time get away with it. But yeah, other than that, I think Figueroa, will win via TKO in round 8, and then I don't know where Fulton will go on in his career, to be completely honest. But going back to the main event, to give a bit of a individual type, I suppose, breakdown about each fighter and, say what I think's good and to an extent maybe negative a little bit, but of course, not give too much of an insight because they are both world class, the best of the best type fighters, and you can't say everything that's so good about each one of them. But Benavidez, of course, he has excellent power. Both of them have excellent power. The only thing that was interesting about the fact that when they both went up to light heavyweight, was that neither of them won via stoppage. They've both been on great stoppage winning runs, and both have been looking so powerful and aggressive and dominant in their performances to be able to just kind of push away their opponents, but neither of them was able to get a stoppage against opponents which perhaps were arguably a bit of a step down on what they had been fighting. Well, Benavidez more so what he'd been fighting. So, that was just, like I say, an interesting thing. I think Morrell hurts Glajdic perhaps a little bit more than Benavidez hurts Vosdick, but maybe you got to give both of them credit for having great chins and being able to keep coming forwards. But yeah, like I say, it was just interesting to see how they were both perhaps looked a little bit less destructive at the weight. And I still believe that Benavidez has excellent power. I still believe that he has got very good hand speed when he wants to use it, but perhaps he didn't utilize it or use it as much as what he sometimes does in that last fight versus Vosdick. There's been clips and highlights where Benavidez has switched on and really shown his hand speed and really looked powerful and dominant and just been able to look highlight reel esque. And he used that a little bit versus Vosdick, not too much. He does partner up his shots very well, Benavidez. He's very aggressive in his work. He cuts off the ring very well. He lets his hands go, of course, like I've just touched upon. He's very vicious in his work as well, as I feel like it's a very good word to use. He's typically an in-close type fighter for the most part. He walks you down to kind of get in close, but then he also finds a way in. I'm not really overly too sure how he finds his way in because he is a big target and he is there to be hit, but he always seems to force his way in and be able to have success when he is doing so. Everything he throws is with power, and so he definitely brings that fear element and that monster element to his game by just showing how much power he has with every single shot. He slows momentum of fighters very well, and perhaps he might be able to do that versus Morrell. He extends just the right amount, and I feel like that's something which perhaps is the way that he's able to find his way in. He's extending just the right amount to be able to land his shots. He's not overextending at all in his work. He puts his all into his shots. He's typically very accurate for the most part. He's got a high guard and he's very much able to just get the better out of the exchanges. And from him being able to get the better out of the exchanges versus Vosdick, that's how he convincingly won the fight, to be completely honest. And yeah, like I mentioned, both got high guards as well. Both going to probably use that as their main defense. Negatives about Benavidez: he stands quite tall, like I mentioned. He's definitely a big target, and he's definitely there to be hit. If you can hit him and land and actually hurt him, that's a whole different story, though. He can be caught with a jab, and perhaps consistently a little bit caught with a jab. Morrell's jab is very good and it's fast, and I definitely would believe that it's better than Vosdick's. He does move back if he takes strong shots. That might sound quite obvious, but at this weight, it's seemingly he's actually taking more of an effect to shots. Vosdick, his jab was very slow, robotic, and flat-footed, like I say, the way that he threw it. But it seemed to still be able to push Benavidez back a little bit at time. So, like I say, he's able to be moved around perhaps a little bit more at this weight. His reactions aren't as sharp as that of Morrell's, I believe, and his timing isn't anything too crazy from what I've seen. In his last fights, especially, he doesn't always remember his jab. I think his jab is good and it does help him at times, and I feel like maybe he should go back to it a little bit more at times. But like I said, I don't feel like he always remembers his jab. He can square up a bit. He can be a bit flat-footed. For the most part, he can be quite flat-footed, and I think Morrell isn't really that. He can struggle against fast hands a little bit. He can load up. He doesn't always remember his body work. It's excellent when he throws it, but he doesn't always remember it. He can't admire his work, and he can jump into shots. Sometimes you like to see him jump into shots. Sometimes it can cause, defensive weaknesses, openings if he does do that. Morrell, as a fighter, obviously, like I mentioned, he's got very fast hands as well. He's got a great jab, and he uses that, and he still showcased that very well, and the speed versus Kalajdzic. He's got better footwork, in my opinion, than that of Klajdik. He follows off his jab very well. The kind of going round with the hook after following off his jab is very nice. He waits for his moment very well, and he steps into his shots, and that's where a lot of his power is generated from, like I say, just really stepping into his work. He lets his hands go. He's a pressure fighter throughout a lot of the fight that they both are. They both are going to try walk you down, so this fight could definitely be a meet in the centre of the ring type fight, similar to that of Bivol versus Beterbiev, and that might happen, and see how it goes if that does happen. He's got a high guard. He's quite measured in his work a lot of the time as well. He tries to push you back and tries to get you on the back foot for the most part, and he can fight at an in close or at a mid range. And there are, like I say, similarities between these two fighters. That's just what, in my opinion, is going to make such an excellent fight. Like I mentioned, this card full of great matchups. negatives about him. I feel like he is less physical / maybe a bit less aggressive than that of Benavidez, and he might overly respect Benavidez a bit too much, and he might be the more willing fighter to go on the back foot, and we haven't really seen him on the back foot too much as of yet. He can follow you around the ring. I don't think he cuts off the ring as well as Benavidez. He can sometimes go for the singular shot knockouts, and I don't think he varies his attack quite as much, and that's something in which I feel like will come at some point. I would like to see it come a little bit more, because I feel like he probably could have got Klajsnik out of there. Like I said, I feel like he did hurt him if he just varied up his attacks a bit more. He, like I say, hasn't really been put on the back foot too much. I think his timing at times, again, similar to that of Benavidez, isn't always amazing. He can stay in range, get caught with shots. He can also be caught out, just surprised by certain shots just because he is waiting, staying in range, getting a bit too comfortable at times. Benavidez is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Morrell is going to win via majority decision. Yes, this might be a controversial thing to say, but I think that Morrell is going to be able to do it. I think he's going to have perhaps the better footwork, and if he is able to evade Benavidez for a lot of the time, he might be able to have a lot of success with the jab, Morrell, and follow up upon that at points, but not do that too much, not get too greedy. We're going to have to really see his discipline in this fight. I think it's definitely going to be tested. I think it's going to be a very close fight, and it's going to be a great matchup, and I think, like I say, Morrell is just about going to be able to snag it with just that bit more speed, that bit better jab, and that bit hopefully better movement for his case. Then we could go on to fight next. I mean, it probably would be the rematch. If it's as close to a fight in which I see it being, then it probably will be a rematch, and I'm sure everybody will want that, and nobody would be against that. If not, of course, they've been both ordered to fight the winner of Bivol vs. Beterbiev, but like I mentioned, if Bivol just beat Beterbiev and it's another great close fight, in which it definitely can be, then we could definitely see a trilogy fight between the two of them, and so, that we don't necessarily know. You can't bank on that. If I'm Benavidez and Morrell, you can't bank on that happening. Or Buatsi versus Smith is kind of the only real other option in the light heavyweight division. Like I mentioned, the division is in an interesting time at the moment. There's these four great fighters, but they're all fighting each other. Then when you kind of look outside of that, Buatsi versus Smith is a great fight, but Smith's lost at World Championship level and Buatsi hasn't, but he hasn't quite reached that level as of yet. And, versus Smith, he probably is deserving of that, but I don't necessarily know who's going to take him as a fight. Boatsi, to be completely honest, I just don't see any of these four taking him as a matchup. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.